International Podcast Day 2019. Hope everybody's out there. Yeah, Aimee, just throw it up, man. It's exciting
awesome.
Already. It's
Yes.
awesome. And yeah, make sure you're using hashtag International Podcast Day throughout the event. We're super excited to have Aimee J this year from Chasing Dreams with Aimee J podcast. How are you, Aimee?
I am great. It's a wonderful day, beautiful day in Maryland. And I was telling you earlier, this is a great way to cap off the night.
It's a perfect way. Yeah,
Yep.
It's a fantastic, and you're our first main speaker for International Podcast Day, so we're really excited. As a matter of fact, we met. I don't know if you remember in podcast movement in Anaheim.
You took a picture with my sign.
Yes, absolutely. And first, I have all your contact information in my phone. Yeah, somehow we stopped everything. So awesome to have you on there. Before we hand the reins over to you, I did want to thank all of our 2019 International Podcast Day sponsors. Our platinum sponsor is Blueberry. They are a full-service podcasting company providing hosting, podcast stats, and podcast advertising opportunities. You can find out more over at blueberry.com. And thanks to our gold sponsor, repurpose.io, where you can automatically convert your audio podcast into engaging videos and upload them to YouTube, Facebook, and several other social media channels. Check them out over at repurpose.io/IPD. And of course, Libsyn is our gold sponsor, is a podcast hosting, distribution, and monetization solution for audio and video podcasters worldwide. Reach your audience everywhere and on the most popular audience destinations like Spotify and Pandora. Find them over at libsyn.com. Of course, thank you to our streaming partner that we're using right now, StreamYard. And of course, our celebration supporters, Second Line Themes, Geek Rising, Synth, Outlier HQ, and Focusrite. You can find more about these sponsors over at internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. There's free stuff. There's discounted services. Make sure you get over there and enjoy all that. So, Aimee, I am going to turn the reins over to you. You're going to be talking about giving your guest on a podcast a white glove experience.
Yes, indeed. Let's talk about it.
All right. Well, this is all you.
I think the controls are here. Hold on. Let me see if I can share my screen. Wow, that's very, what is it? The Leonardo DiCaprio movie? Inception.
Oh, Inception, yep.
Yeah, it was exactly. Very Inception just then.
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Let me go ahead and do this. Now. Can you see it?
Yep.
So because I guess the way the slideshow thing works, can't see the comments. So Dave, if you can let me know if there are questions, I think when I switch back, I'll answer questions, guys, as soon as I kind of can get back to it. So I'll just go ahead and start. Before I begin, happy International Podcast Day. Guys, I did not realize I was the first one. That is awesome. So let me be the first to wish you officially, as a main speaker, happy International Podcast Day. These guys have done such a great job. I've always wanted to speak on International Podcast Day. Some of my friends have done it each year, different ones, and it's been wonderful. Podcasting has changed my life. Hands down. There's no question about it. So I'll share a little bit about that story before I get into this, but I also want to share that I love the sponsors. Repurpose.io that you just heard from Hanny. I use it. It's great. It's helped me build my YouTube playlist. Libsyn, I use them. And the others are as well. Blueberry was actually my podcast player for my first podcast, which was Revisiting Haven. So that's actually how I started in podcasting. It really took me, you know what? I'm going to see if I can not share initially. And I'll get back to it. So I started podcasting in 2013, which was awesome and fun. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so I was like, you know what? Let me podcast about a show that I like. And so the show was called Haven. It's on Sci-Fi Channel. And it was crazy. It was a sci-fi show about Audrey, who was trying to figure out her life. And there is these troubles, which are like superpowers, but with a bad effect on them. And I started podcasting with a co-host who knew nothing about podcasting. And, you know, I didn't know. I was just trying to figure it out. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun. We podcasted for 2.5, almost 3 years. And podcasting took me to Nova Scotia, Canada. So shout out to all my Canadians, to the set of Haven. And we became friends with the writers, the cast, the crew. And we got to do a full day interview with like 10 people. And so that really inspired me that I could see the power of podcasting, because you could never tell me, if you told 21-year-old Aimee that I would be on the set of a show one day, never would have believed it. Never would have believed it, hands down. Would have thought you were just joking or messing with me. But it happened. And so with that, I decided that, hey, podcasting is powerful. It can really do a lot of things. And so with that, I wanted to do something that would make a difference in the world. And that came through the Chasing Dreams podcast. I had a family member who kind of just gave up on her dream of sorts because it wasn't stable. And that bummed me out. That broke my heart because I just didn't understand why she would do that. And I was like, I'm bound and determined to show you there are people living their life happily without making sacrifices for that. And that's how the podcast came about. I worked to put it together. I did a GoFundMe because I had no idea how to do it. And if I wanted to do it, I wanted to do it right. And Daryl Darnell of Pro Podcast Solutions helped me out. And, we raised $4,000 to get equipment and such. And you can probably see it, kind of. That's my equipment over in the corner. And, my life changed ever since then. We've been podcasting with the podcast 4 years. And, from that, in now having guests, right? So my first show was just talking about a TV show, just episodes. It was me, my co-host, and we just spoke. And we heard from the listeners on social media what they wanted, and we kind of adapted on it. But then I was going to do a show with a guest. It was just me and a guest, and it was different every week. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do this a little bit differently. And so that is kind of how I began to put together a white glove experience. And that is kind of why we're here today to talk about that, because your relationship with your audience, your relationship with your listeners, your relationship with your co-host or your guest is so important. And truly, it's going to depend on what you do. That's going to matter. So let me pull this back up. So I've been told, and this isn't just me saying I give a white glove experience. People have said that being on the show has made them feel like they've had a white glove experience. And so before I define what a white glove experience is, I kind of wanted to talk about companies that give a white glove treatment, even if they don't say it's a white glove treatment, right? All of Disney, if you've ever been to Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Resorts, Disney Cruises, all of them give you a white glove treatment. They go above and beyond what you're expecting, right? They hold your hand essentially from the beginning. When you check in, you get bands, you get an amazing experience out of this world that just takes you to another level, right? You've been to hotels, you've been on vacation, but then you go on a Disney vacation and it's like, why do I ever go on another type of vacation? Now, I say that being jealous that I haven't done a Disney vacation, but I want to go on a Disney vacation because everybody has given me that feedback, that this is like nothing I've ever experienced before. And so I need to do that. And Disney is just known to go above what is expected to make your experience and vacation memorable. And so that's the kind of feeling you want to evoke in the people that you are working with. Another one is the Ritz-Carlton. And Disney, I believe, has actually used some of the theories and bases of the Ritz-Carlton and how they treat their employees, their staff, their guests in their principles as well. And the Ritz-Carlton is known for taking care of you, right? You want to stay at the Ritz. That's what people say, right? Instead of Motel 6, Motel 8, whatever it is, you want the Ritz-Carlton. You want that treatment where they take you around. They make you feel special. That's inevitably what people are doing, is making you feel special when they're treating you with white gloves. That's that extra care that we're looking for. Apple is notorious for the white glove treatment. It's not as obvious, or when you go in the store, it may not feel like it, especially when you're in a store that's crowded with so many people. It may not feel at all like you're getting that white glove treatment. But when you buy something from Apple, from the moment you click buy, you get treated well, right? Have you ever seen those boxes from Apple where you kind of lift up and it's a white box and it's the easiest box to open? Have you ever tried to open boxes before in other companies? It's like you got to get a knife, you got to get scissors, you got to cut. It's so painful. Apple gives the white glove experience in a different way by actually moving it and kind of, well, it's not moving it entirely, but what they do is they go the extra mile in making sure that your experience in opening and using their product is smooth and seamless, right? They give a tab that you just lift up and the computer lifts up outside the box. These are the small things that Apple does to make it easier for you. They add a tab so that you can kind of unwind and open the package without having to get a knife or anything to kind of just pull it apart, right? That's a white glove kind of moment. Those moments are the things that make a difference to the audience, the customer, the guest, the co-host. Those are the things that while we're a podcast, not just a podcast, but while we're podcasters, it's important to incorporate into our process. And so the other one is years before someone bought a snowblower, and I did not want to put this thing together. And when I went to Home Depot and bought this, they offered literally a white glove experience package. And what we did was you pay for the package and someone will come to your house and put the snowblower together. And it's like, wow, I don't have to do anything. This is fantastic. So if you do that, right, that's that extra step that Home Depot didn't have to do. I could have struggled with all the whistles and the bolts and the nuts and whatnot, turning things the wrong way and having things in the wrong angle, right? But no, I just get a white glove treatment service and they will literally come. They take the boxes away for you. They clean up the mess. They put it together, right? Stores are now offering these white glove treatment packages for you. Have you ever bought a Lovesac sofa? Lovesacks can be put together through pegs and spaces, and it's amazing. One, their sofas are fantastic. I recommend them. Little pricey, but I do recommend them. But they offer a package. If you don't want to put together the sofa yourself, they will come to your house and put it together, clean up the boxes, throw away the trash so that you don't have anything left. That's a small little thing that they do to help make the experience of buying from them above normal, right? So again, we're looking for things that are above normal. So what is white glove, right? If you've heard everything I've just talked about, white glove is essentially something that is marked by special care or attention. And so that's why it's always been important to me. I am someone who, when working with someone, when helping someone, when somebody comes over and stays at my house, I want to make sure they get special attention and are taken care of and feel like they are in their own home. And it's just the same way that I want when people participate in my podcast, I want them to also feel the same way that they would if they were just in a strange place. A lot of times my guests have no idea what a podcast is. A lot of co-hosts are new. And so you may have people who are like, hey, can you explain what this is? And that's usually guest co-hosts, the ones who rotate in. They're not called guests, but they're co-hosts. It depends, right? To each their own. But either way, you want to make sure their experience is above the rest. The other thing is your audience. You want to make sure your audience has a great experience, one that they don't get anywhere else, because you want them to focus on you. So when we talk about that, right, kind of led into it for you, who should get that white glove treatment? Who should be taken care of especially? Well, it's your audience and your listeners. Your audience and your listeners need to feel as though you are talking to them, that they are not just some random person in a sea of listeners. When you do your podcast, you are talking to that one listener, and everyone should feel like they are that one listener. They are the audience. And sometimes people can do it naturally. Sometimes people have to work on it. We'll talk a little bit more about each of those things soon. The other one is the guest or the co-host, however you want to describe them. If you're having a rotating co-host or you're having a different guest each time, they may not be familiar with your podcast. They may not be familiar with what you're trying to do. They may have been brought in by a third party, right? A booking agent or someone. They may have been kind of just shooting out cold emails trying to get onto a show, or you may have found them, but they may not be familiar with your podcast and what you're doing. And so as a result, you have to take care of them. You have to take care of them because it's an unknown area. It's an unknown environment for them. And so the way to make them comfortable, the way to make them at ease to answer your questions, to talk on the podcast, is to make sure they are comfortable. And the only way you're going to do that is to take care of them. So we're going to talk about how we take care of our audience and listeners and how we're going to take care of our guests and co-hosts. And so the two aren't mutually exclusive. You can use some of the things we're talking about in audience and listeners with your guest and your co-host. It's really up to you, but it's the small things, again, that will make the difference. And so that's what we want to kind of talk about. All right. So if we're talking about our audience, especially on this International Podcast Day, right? Please do not say that your audience is international. That is not at all what you want to do. If you say your audience is international, then they don't feel identified. They don't feel like you're speaking to them. You're just speaking to the void at that point. So it's so important that you get clear as to who your audience is. Who are you trying to speak to? Who is it you're trying to reach with your message, with your story? So keep that in mind. The next is, why do you want to speak to them? When I first started podcasting, I did not have an answer for either of these two questions. I didn't know who I wanted to speak to. I just wanted to get my voice out there. And the first podcast I ever started, technically, was called Aimee J Live. It lasted like 3 months, 4 months, something like that. But it was so sporadic. I was posted, there was probably like 12 episodes, but it was so sporadic. My first one was about my experience at New York Comic Con, my first time. And it was great. I had fun, but I didn't know who I was speaking to. I was like, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And that's not at all how it works. So I didn't really have a purpose. I just wanted to try a new medium. And that's why Aimee J Live never really took off. But I was never mad at that because I was never really trying, if that makes sense. Have you ever tried and seen, man, this isn't working the way I need it to, and something else comes along? Well, while I was trying and failing at Aimee J Live, Revisiting Haven came about. And if you want to check it out, it's revisitinghaven.com. Podcast episodes are there. And I figured out who I wanted to speak to. I wanted to speak to fans of Haven. And I wanted to speak to them so that we could talk about the show, so that we could all enjoy and spread awareness and joy about the show, because we loved it. There were so many conversations happening on social media. I thought, why not do an analysis and deep dive into these episodes on a podcast? Seems to make sense. And so I actually reached out to a fellow fan on social media, on Twitter. I said, hey, do you want to do a show with me? We'll just talk about it. There's no big thing. So for like 20 some episodes, we just talked about the show. And it was only after that I kind of got brave and saw that the show writers were liking our posts when the episodes were going out. And so I was like, hey, can we get an interview with you? And they were like, yes. Right. And that's something that the audience wanted. They wanted to hear from the writers. And so that passion of knowing why I wanted to speak carried through all the way with Revisiting Haven. A TV show. I was talking about a TV show, but I had so much fun. It brought me so much joy just to do that. And so you have to know the answers to those questions. And so, like I was saying, what can you do for them? For Revisiting Haven, what I could do was bring interviews to them, an analysis of the episodes, and allow them to think about the things they were thinking about, or give them a new perspective that they may not have thought of. Interviewing the writers, interviewing the show composer, going to Nova Scotia, Canada, and interviewing the cast, the crew, right? I think we did like 10 episodes, 10 interviews in an all day. We got to see the record a little bit, but this is what the people were asking for. This is what literally the audience had requested. And so a lot of it is you figuring out, but the other part is listening to what they're asking for. Now, Chasing Dreams is a little bit different. Chasing Dreams was my third podcast, technically, but it was my passion project. So I needed to figure out, I was still trying to define what I wanted to do for them. Who did I want to speak to? At the time, I thought I wanted to speak to postgraduate people, 26, 38, right? I hit that audience answer. And I wanted to speak to them to show them they could still be happy doing what they want and reminding them that they were in control. And, you know, as you start a podcast, you think you know the answer, excuse me, and then you work on it. You develop, you adjust, you evolve. The podcast should evolve with you. And so as I kept going, right now we're at 200 and plus episodes. I can't remember which one's airing right now, but you know, the podcast evolved with each of those things. And so we listened to the audience as to what they wanted. A lot of it was me trying to figure it out. And sometimes, guys, you'll ask the audience and you'll hear crickets. And at that point, you got to make the decision, because it's a two-way street, right? They're listening, you're producing, but if they're not telling you, hey, what they want to hear, you need to find it out in different ways, right? What are they struggling with? What can you do to help them? Is it a Q&A? Is it getting specialists in that area? You know, there are ways and things you can do. You just have to put the effort and the work in to figure out what those answers are. And the answer, this is a big one. You can't please everyone. That is, if you try to please everyone in your audience, that is the biggest mistake you can make. Trying to please everyone is the biggest mistake you can make, because you're going to do things that your true audience may not like, right? But you took that chance by trying to do something for someone else that isn't really who you're targeting, right? Don't put, for example, don't put sponsorship in for people that doesn't relate to your audience, right? If you're a show about gourmet foods, don't put a sponsorship ad in for race cars. That doesn't make sense. Why are you trying to appeal to race car drivers? That's not who your audience is, right? You can't please everyone. Stay focused on your audience. Stay focused on who you're trying to reach. That is where you're going to succeed and grow. It's not going to be a 0 to 60 kind of thing. You're not going to get it like that. You're not going to go from 0 to 100,000 downloads. Only a select few people will do that. And those select few people who do that have already built the audience and brought them over from somewhere else. Okay, so I hope you guys understand that. I can't see questions yet, so I'm hoping that works. If not, leave a question in the box. I'll work with Dave after we get through this to kind of answer them and talk to you guys about it. But do not try to please everyone, right? That is so, so, so important. Let's talk about the flip side. When you have a guest, right? Because there's two types of shows. You can do your own conversation, your own kind of soliloquy if you want. And some people do that and do it well. That's fine. But if you have a guest and a co-host, you're bringing someone else in to your podcast, into your episode, and together it is a collaborative experience to make the best episode you can, right? You can bring a guest in and they may not be prepared. They may not answer your questions. And I've had some bad ones. I've had some that have thrown me off, and you have to prepare them, right? In the beginning, rough sales, because I didn't know what I was doing as a podcaster. My guests were new to podcasting. And so we're all trying to figure it out together. But if you can do the grunt work up ahead, up front, it will go so far. And, you know, this is my experience with podcasting is scraped together through various resources. I started with reading books. I don't know if I have that book next to me, but reading books. I did Podcaster's Paradise for a little bit, you know, had some friends answer questions. So all of it's figuring it out. But when you do that work up front, you go a long way. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is your podcast format? Are you solo? Or do you have a guest, a co-host? Are you taking phone calls in? What is it you're doing? So with Revisiting Haven, I had a co-host. And for that, we had the same format. She was not familiar at all with podcasting, and I had to let her know, you need a mic, you need headphones, and that's it. I'll send you the information after. With Chasing Dreams, it's a guest. I have guests every week. I think I've had co-host and guests on probably 3 or 4 episodes, but mostly I have just guests. And, each guest is different. Their experience with podcasting is different. Their knowledge of what a podcast is different, right? You have these varying levels. And so you got to keep that in mind as to which format works for you. Knowing what format you have is going to change and move you as to how you're going to take the next step, right? So if you are, this whole thing is really focusing on the ones that have a guest or a co-host. If you have a new guest or co-host with every episode, let's just talk about that. Who do you want to have on your show? And the way you're going to know that is to focus on what again? Your audience. Again, you're not going to be able to please everyone. Focus on your audience. So if you know your audience, you have to understand what is it they're trying to do? What is your audience what are you trying to solve for them? And for me, it's inspiring my audience and my listeners to chase their dreams. That you can be happy by following and being your own true story, right? If you follow your own passion, if you make your own decisions, you can be happy. And a lot of people don't believe that. So that was my mission. My mission was to kind of focus and work on that. So the people I want on my show are people who are inspiring, people who are being happy with what they want. I made it a point that you did not have to be doing it full time. You could be doing it as a side business, a side hustle, whatever it was, right? You could be doing it in your spare time. That was fine. Those were criteria I had. One criteria I added in the beginning that I've removed around episode like 165, 170 or something like that is that I will not have someone on from a business. So if you are a business and you were trying to get on my show, it's not going to work. But I'll give you a hint. If you pitch yourself not as a business, but as someone who's passionate about what they're doing and how you can help my audience, you'd have a better shot. So if you want to there it is. But if you pitch yourself as a business, I'm shutting it down off the bat. I apologize. It's not a fit for me anymore. In the beginning, I had people who were businesses. That wasn't a problem for me. Hanny has been on my show. Hanny Moore, who just spoke on Repurpose. But Hanny, we didn't talk with Hanny about Repurpose. We didn't talk about, at that point, Simple Podcast Press, which I use. We talked about why he was doing it. We were talking about what made him want to do this as a side hustle and now a business. But we didn't focus on the business. So you see the difference? So you have to understand who do you want to have on your show, because that's going to be a game changer for you guys. Why have them on the show? Why is such an important question, right? You've heard me say it a number of times. Why do you want to have this person on the show? You have to have an answer to that. If the answer is because you absolutely desperately need someone to fill this week, then maybe take a week off, because that's not a good answer. And that's something I didn't accept or realize till probably after episode 100. And maybe even after like episode 125. Just because you have a week and you need to fill it, I would rather you take the week off than fill it with someone mediocre. Not that my guests are mediocre. Everyone has a dream. They're awesome. But I think that either I could have approached it differently or found someone that was a little bit stronger of a dream chaser to share their story. So we'll talk about that, because what you have to also look at it as, this is a collaborative arrangement. When you are with a guest or a co-host, you guys are doing it together. You're working with each other to produce an awesome episode for your listeners, for your audience to hear. And so it can't be take. It can't be, hey, you're on my show. It's my way or the highway. You have to figure this out. You have to work with them. So how can you help one another, right? They're getting exposure by being on your show, but you are also getting something from them, right? So you got to keep that in mind. How can you help one another? So here's a gentle reminder. It's one that I did not embrace myself until I think, and I had a conversation, I think, with, I think it was either Joe Pardo or Stephen Hart of Trailblazer podcast and Joe Pardo of the Dreamers podcast, formerly the Dreamers podcast, but I think, Joe Pardo, everyone knows Joe Pardo. And we were talking about how you have the power to say no to a podcast episode that's bad. So not every guest or co-host you have will be a hit. Not every podcast episode you produce will be a hit. And that's okay. That's fine. There are podcasters, and if you're one of them, hit me up in the chat box afterwards so I can talk to you. There are podcasters who, if they record and it's terrible, they will not air that episode. I'm like, man, that is so brave of you. How do you do that? Because I feel bad. I'm like, man, I took their time. We recorded. It has to go out. For the longest time, I felt that way. And it was only after I realized, hey, this is my podcast. This is my baby. I can do what I want and need to do what I want for the best of the show. Did I realize that I could say no, that I should be following up? And let me know how you do it if you also say no to some episodes that you've recorded, because now I will, if there's a bad episode, what I will be doing is replying back to them and say, hey, this didn't work out the way it should have been. It would not be a great representation for the episode. Some people just don't say anything. And I'm like, how do you do that? They just wonder when it'll air and you just go radio silent. How does that work? So I'm curious if you guys have thoughts on how to do that, let me know. But we're looking to make it so that it is a hit, right? So we're looking at the opposite of that, but curious about the fact if it isn't a hit. Let me know. So my white glove experience is, as the host, as the producer, I am the guide. I am the chauffeur for my guest and for my co-host. So I need to be the one driving them where they need to be and helping them get the information they need, right? That's my responsibility, because I'm going to assume, maybe incorrectly, but better safe than sorry, I'm going to assume they don't know what my podcast is about or what is happening. So what I do is I have an interview flow. Let's see if I can flip this so you guys can see it. Okay. I have an interview flow, which you hopefully see on the screen. And what it does is it kind of takes my guest or my co-host through to show them what is going to happen, how to prepare for the interview, what to do, that we're recording video and audio, how I'm doing it, as you see through Zoom. I've provided instructions for how to get it. And I've given them the Zoom help page because I want to make sure that we're good to go. And I tell them, hey, this is what the interview flow is. This is what will happen when you jump onto my episode. I need to update this, but we'll do an audio video check. Before we go live, we'll talk. And it's important to let them know that, because nobody wants to be surprised. Excuse me. When they jump onto the screen, they're going to think, hey, are we recording off the bat? Is this off the record? Is it on the record? Let them know. And let them know when you start recording. It's only fair to them. Be respectful of their privacy and the things that they're saying, because they may be saying something to them is, just between the two of you and shouldn't be shared. And let it be clear to them when that is, right? So I let them know. I will tell them before we go live, which means before I start recording. And then I tell them, hey, we're going to do some bonus content. We're going to have an interview, a little intimate conversation. And then I'm going to have them. So if you ever listen to my podcast, Chasing Dreams with Aimee J, the way it works is my guest introduces the show. I introduce the episode afterwards, but they introduce the show by saying, hey, my name is Jane Doe, and you are listening to Chasing Dreams with Aimee J. That's what we do. And so I let them know, hey, this is what's happening. That's the third thing that'll happen. And then we're just going to go. We're going to kick it off, and we're going to have an introduction and kind of give them a sense of what we're going to talk about. I want to hear about what their dream is. I want to hear about their obstacles, right? Give them a sense of the questions that I'm going to ask. Fair, full disclosure, I don't use these questions. I kind of prepare. I have I'm told I have a knack for asking questions and doing interviews, and it comes from me listening to a story, me hearing and learning about someone. So This gives them a sense of what the questions will be, but it's not the questions I will ask necessarily. And I tell them that again in the beginning. I want them to understand that we will also wrap it up with what is something you can do to chase your dreams, to help our listeners. What is one action they could do, right? So I tell them all this. I share these things to keep in mind. And some people will read it. Most people will not. But I provide this information for them to help make it easier. But you have to keep in mind, probably 80% of my people don't actually read this. And for those people, I go over it in the beginning. And so that's what you kind of have to do. Emails are your friend. I send an email for almost everything. I have a process of emails that we go through. And so I send an invitation email. I send a follow-up email when they say, yes, hey, I will be on your show. I send a follow-up email that says, great, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Here is how you can book on my calendar at your convenience. And hey, while you're doing that, here's some information I need. And so it's a communication back and forth, right? Once they send that, I send them, hey, here's how you prepare. So there's all these emails going back and forth. And let me see if I can, oh, it didn't pull up. I think it's on the next screen. I'll show you my guide on the emails and kind of keeping that up. But I send these emails so that we can have that conversation, so that if they have questions at any point, right? Because I put all the information they need in the email. Say, hey, if you have any questions, don't feel bad. Let me know. We can jump on a call easily. If you want to test things, we can jump on a call to answer questions, or you can reply to these emails. That's what I'm doing, right? So I send an intro email. I send a follow-up email. And then before the episode, especially if it is more than a week or two in advance, the day before, I send an email to say, hey, just checking in. Hope all is well with you. Wanted to confirm we are still on for tomorrow's recording at X, right? So that way you decrease the risk of people forgetting, right? So emails, so important. Emails are your friend. Communication with them. Some people don't do emails. Some people do WhatsApp. Some people will do text. Some people will do phone calls. It is your preference. What is your comfort level? For me, emails are more than enough. I will follow up on text sometimes if they're like, hey, text is better for me. No problem. I could do that. But follow up is the most important thing. I want my guest to feel like they are not alone in a sea of uncertainty. I am driving them where they need to go. I am helping them answer questions. That's your job. You are there to make it easier for them. The other thing that I do is after my guest does their episode, after we record it, and this is up for debate. Some people don't do this, which is fine, to each their own. I am someone who has to give gifts. Some people are like, Aimee, of course, Aimee brought some gift. I have to give gifts. So that's important to me. I think. Yeah. So I give, assuming this camera is actually on, I give a wristband. Stop, keep going. And that's important to me. It's something small. I send a thank you note to them. So I send an email to say, hey, I'm going to send you a gift. I'd love to do that. Please get back to me. So all this stuff is a lot of moving parts, but I have it down to a science now. So that's what I'm doing. So I initially started with this spreadsheet because we all got to start somewhere. I have a spreadsheet where my information is completed, right? I have my guest. I have their email address. I don't ask for their mailing address right away, but I have all of this stuff there. And so I have checklists to help me keep track of what I have and what I don't have and what I need. And so this keeps me on point and lets me know if, as you see in column K, did I send my thank you email or the gift email? I would put yes. And there are other columns in there for other emails I may send, right? So this keeps me on track and helps me kind of see what's coming and helps me see what I have going on. So I don't think I have Airtable on here, do I? Oh, no, I don't. So I started with the spreadsheet. I have moved since to Airtable, which is an amazing database of spreadsheets. And I wish I could show you what it is, but I don't have Airtable on here. If we have time at the end, I will try and log in and show you guys, but this is what I'm using now. And I love it, or this is what I started off with. And this was more than enough for my needs. I used this for 190 episodes. It was only till I got 4 years into podcasting with Chasing Dreams did I go over to Airtable, right? That being said, if you want to start off right, you probably should start with Airtable, but it takes time to set up correctly. To keep that in mind. So, real quick, I'm going to switch over to something. I'll show you Airtable because I think we have time. But before I switch off my sharing screen, I will have a copy of that spreadsheet available to you guys if you want to download it. It's aimiej21.com/international podcast day. In hindsight, I probably should just put IPD. I didn't though. So International Podcast Day, aimiej21.com/international podcast day. Okay. So check that out. Let me see if I can get Airtable because I really think I'm a proponent of it. I've converted a few people to it. I highly recommend it. So I just want to see if I can show you how I am kind of keeping track of everyone now. And Airtable is a great way to do it. Assuming my LastPass works. LastPass. There we go. Ah, it's Google. That's why. This may not work. Let's see. If you don't have LastPass, you should. All right. Okay, great. So I have all of my guests in their own spreadsheet, right? I take care, just so that you can see, I have all the guests, their information. I have all the episodes they're in. That then connects them to all the episode information. All of this is how Airtable works. It's a lot. And so I'm not really kind of showing you everything, but this is kind of the way it is. So all my podcast episodes, that spreadsheet you saw earlier, that's what this is. That's just put into Airtable and it connects to the guest, whoever it is. That's the beauty of Airtable. It connects all the spreadsheets together. So I get to see this. I see the status of my episode, and this allows me to kind of see where everything is. I think I have the thank you in here too. Instagram, no. But I have the assets for the episodes, the pictures, the artwork. I think I have the thank you gift somewhere in here. It's hard to keep track, but I wanted to make sure you guys saw that so that you could see it, right? So that is cool. Now, how do I get back to StreamYard? All right, there we go. Let me stop the screen. So how do I see the comments in here? Dave, do you know? Because I do not see any comments.
Hey, Aimee. Yeah, we have a question coming in.
Please.
Let me go ahead and get my screen. Okay, we have one from Steph. She is in the chat room. What's the most surprising thing a guest said after they heard their episode?
That it actually sounded good. So I think more or less I get guests who are nervous. This is usually their first foray into interviewing, and they are surprised by their story. They're like, I didn't realize how powerful my story was until I heard it back. And Cynthia Brinkley Scott is probably the most recent example of that. She is one who doesn't do a lot of interviews. She does a nonprofit, Love the Hopeful, where she feeds the homeless in Baltimore City. And she's amazing. And I was so grateful that she did the podcast episode, but she was so nervous. And so afterwards, she loved it. She was so blown away by how well it went. I don't think people give themselves enough credit for actually being able to, that's all podcasting is, right? Just sharing your story, speaking. But they do a great job. Yeah. Hope that answered it, Steph.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I think you're right, Aimee. There is, when you, not only as a guest, but also when you just consume podcasts as an audio enthusiast, you're always surprised at how well your story is told, or what's going to resonate specifically with one statement or one phrase or one story
Yeah.
that one of the guests shared. And I think that's important to note, that it's a unique experience. And a lot of these guests, they're not really going to know exactly how things are going to turn
Yeah.
out. But like you said, if you're giving them a good experience, you've prepped with them, if you're asking the right questions and following up correctly as a good interviewer, I think that's a really good opportunity to pull the most out of the story and
Yeah.
out of the guest.
Absolutely. And the other thing I've heard after an episode that's been surprising is, I can't remember who said it, but one of my guests has said that they felt like they were VIP. They felt that they were so taken care of that they didn't have to worry about anything. I sent them an email when their episode was going to air the week before it would, and then the day before it aired. And, they said that they felt so taken care of that they were willing, because I sent an email. My email is, hey, your episode's going to go live tomorrow. If you would like, I don't say, hey, do this. I say, if you would like, please go ahead and share and promote the episode. Here are some links that I put in there, and I share the episode artwork. And they're like, I am absolutely proud to share this because you took care of me. I want to help take care of you. So it's humbling when people say that, I think.
Yeah, anytime you think you can enable them, you can empower them to just be prepared and have those questions answered, right? Because there is a lot of unknown when it comes to being a guest, and a lot of unknown, in just any new venture that you want to, and maybe you've had a guest on that has been a guest on 10 or 12 different podcasts. Okay, they're going to be comfortable with the setup and the build up to it, and I think it's really important for those that are just like one-off guests, chasing their dreams and having their stories shared, that you really lay out the red carpet for them and really show, hey, I'm going to walk you through this entire step. You are just as important to me as everything else. And I think that's critically important. I think you shared that really well in your presentation.
I think the word you use that's so powerful is empowerment, right? As a podcaster, producer, you are empowered to do what's best for you. So if it's not an episode that you want to air, don't air it. But also that the guest is empowered to share their story honestly, and to remember and realize, and something we have to remember is, just because they've been on a podcast doesn't mean they've been on your podcast. And your podcast is probably different from someone else's podcast and what they do and how they do it. They may record on Skype and I record on Zoom. It's a different experience. You can't assume everyone has the same experience. It's going to mess you up. And it also just kind of, what they say about making assumptions. Don't do it. Just talk to them. It's better to talk to them and be confirmed than,
No, I absolutely, I get that. Yeah, every experience is going to be unique, and the way I record my podcast every Monday with Steve is very unique, and it's different for different guests that we invite on. And and like you said, if it's sending text message, if it's via DM, if it's via email, it's finding whatever works for that guest. And really honing the thing. We do the same thing with International Podcast Day. There's some people, Aimee, I have your phone number. There's other podcasters that I've simply text. There's people that you can email, DM, is whatever the preference is. I've sat on phone calls for 30 minutes talking to individuals about, how to prepare. And it's just a unique situation. I think the more, as you said, empower, and the more you can prepare them, the better your overall product is going to be at the end of the day.
And here's the thing, right? That's a great point, because one of the things you mentioned that I want to talk about is, what if they can't do Zoom, right? What do you do? Do you not sacrifice the quality, but do you make allowances for a phone call that can be recorded? Do you change to Skype? You have to have that conversation with them, because sometimes, if you want them badly enough, you're going to adjust. You're going to adjust because I have to have their story. All right, cool. We can fix things in post-production. But if you will not make that adjustment, you need to tell them up front. And that's, again, respecting them and their time, and they'll respect yours.
You're right. Everything can't be cookie cutter in podcasting. When it comes, either production or inviting guests on, it's you have to be flexible. And as you said, if your system is set up in a particular way, that's a risk, right? You take of not being able to capture their story and share their story with your audience. But yeah, creating flexibility within your workflow, within your setup, within your post production is just as important as trying to get these guests on. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point about International Podcast Day, right, is not everything is the same. I mean, you're going to hear about this all day, guys. For the next 24 hours, you guys are going to hear different countries represented and how they approach podcasting. That's why this is such an awesome day, to hear the different stories and perspectives that people have and what they do. Can't be cookie cutter. I mean, it's not cookie cutter. So that's the thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, there is no template. There is no form. There's, you like you said, you can use your forms to create workflow and, have all these follow-ups and everything. But when it comes to people's stories and it comes to people's messages and their history and everything in between, yeah, it's super personal. And from whatever boundary and whichever nation's country that you're a part of, it's going to be very unique versus the United States versus Brazil. And even within those boundaries, everybody's story is independent and very, very personal in that respect. And yeah, you're very right. That's what I think you seem to be doing on your podcast. And that's what we're doing on our event as well.
It's interesting that I think sometimes people think that if I take a course, right, I'm not going to name any courses because then you'll be like, you might do it. But if you take a course, there's nothing wrong with taking a course. And there's nothing wrong with following the directions that they've given you, regardless of what system or thing you use. What's going to make your podcast unique is that you put your own spin and flavor on it. That's what's important. We don't need 5 of the same podcasts coming out of the same program. We need your podcast, the way you define it, the way you do it. Use the books, use the resources, YouTube and courses as a guide. But in the end, it has to be yours. And just as like this white glove process, you have to decide what is the extra steps you're going to take. Because some people are like, it's not worth sending a thank you gift. That's just money out of your pocket. Why would you do that? It's important to me. So that's my little thing that I do.
It's very important. And I've actually heard different podcasters actually send microphones to their guests to make sure that they have really good quality. And that's a gift, of course, for that episode, and they're going to return it. But I really like, it could be as easy as a pen, like you showed, the little stickers. I mean, I've received things in the mail from 2 of my favorite podcasters. They're stickers and they're postcards and there's different things, and it goes a really long way. And it really shows that you've invested time to make sure that you have, you just invested time in them, and therefore they're going to invest time in the product, in the podcast that you're putting out.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think the fact that you take that time, that effort, that extra move for them, that investment, is you care about me, right? If you do that for me, then I'm going to go out on a limb for you. If you say, hey, can you share this episode? Like, why not? 1, I'm in it. But 2, she gave me everything I needed. Right. So it's one of those things. I think investment and care are 2 of the biggest things that podcasters can do for their audience and their guests.
Investment, care, and empowerment. I love it. Those are perfect. Well, Aimee, we're just about to wrap up on time here. Let everybody know out there in the International Podcast Day world where they can find your content, where they can meet up with you. What is the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can find me at aimeej21.com. That's AIMEEJ21. I'm also AimieJ21 on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and not YouTube. YouTube is weird. You can find me at AimieJ21.com/YouTube, but just check out AimieJ21.com and you'll find me there.
Perfect. Well, Aimee, I cannot thank you enough. It's been long overdue for having you on International Podcast Day. We appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's going to wrap up the session. We can't thank you enough for representing Chasing Your Dreams, for representing the United States, and of course, representing yourself and your message. So thank you so much for joining.
I appreciate it. Happy IPD, guys.
All right. Everybody, International Podcast Day continues on. Make sure you're using the hashtag International Podcast Day. And just as a reminder for those on the live feed, at the start of the top of the hour, you may have to hit refresh because your browser may not have an autoplay. But on to the next one. Thank you, Aimee.
Take care, guys.
Oh, she's out of there. Okay, end broadcast.